teacher's playground voice to get you in here, and then I use my light trick to get your attention. Wow, that worked pretty well. It's so great to see you all here this afternoon. And you found the place, despite the construction, very flexible. I love it. I'm happy to welcome you all here to Crmse's 2014 Distinguished Lecturer Series presentation. I'm Nadine Bazook. I'm the Interim Director of Crmse. Crmse stands for the Center for Research in Math and Science Education here at San Diego State, but it's much faster to say Crmse. Let me tell you just quickly a little bit about Crmse. Crmse is an interdisciplinary community of scholars here at San Diego State. According to the website, it says, we're dedicated to advancing math and science education at local, state, national, and international levels. What Crmse members do, though, is we do research, we do curriculum development, we do professional development with K-12 teachers, we author some publications, we make some presentations, and we provide some leadership roles in the community. I'd like to thank Dean Stanley Malloy of SDSU's College of Sciences and Dean Joe Johnson of SDSU's College of Education for their ongoing support of Crmse. Now, maybe equally important is where the restrooms are. There actually are two choices for restrooms, but the easiest one, I think, is to just take the elevator down one floor. So if you go back out the way you came in, and just to your right is an elevator. Just go down one floor, it's your only option, and the restrooms are just outside of the elevator in case you need them during the presentation. But back to business. I have the honor of introducing our distinguished lecturer, Dr. Jo Boaler. Any of you see her picture on the marquee next to the interstate? I want to point out to you that there is something else going on campus tonight you may have heard of. Some people might be over at Viejas Arena at 7:30 for some concert by Lady Gaga. That starts at 7:30. I just want you to make sure you realize that while both of these events were announced on the marquee, only this one included a photo. I love it. And of course, somebody asked me if I have put pink in my hair in honor of Lady Gaga's visit, and I said no, it was because I knew Joe was going to be wearing lavender pink, so I wanted to match her. All right, I have to tell you a little bit about her qualifications because even until I read her vita, I didn't know all this stuff. I'll give you a few highlights. You may know she's a professor of math education at Stanford. A few years ago, she also served as chair of the Stanford Teacher Education Program. She got her PhD in math education from King's College in the University of London in 1996. She was very happy to see we had hot water and tea bags outside. She said she was genetically predisposed to having to have tea in the afternoon. So we passed that test as well. She won the British Educational Research Association Award in 1997 for the best PhD in education in that year. But prior to entering graduate school, she was a secondary math teacher for a few years in inner city London. She's gotten lots of awards and honors. I'll mention only a few. She received a National Science Foundation Early Career Award. She's the recipient of a Chair of Excellence from the Marie Curie Foundation and the European Union, which included 3 years of salary and research funding. Pretty nice, huh? She's an elected fellow of the Royal Society of Arts in England. Does that mean you get to put special initials after your name?
It does, yeah.
Wow.
RSA.
FRSA.
FRSA.
Yeah, I read that. FRSA. So she's PhD FRSA. It's fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. That means you can paint pictures or something? Okay. And she's also a fellow of the Center for Advanced Study in the Behavioral Sciences. She served for 4 years as president of the International Organization of Women in Mathematics Education, and we had to reschedule her visit here. I don't know if you remember, we sent out a hold the date that this might have happened in May, but she sent me a very nice email and said, might we possibly change the date? because I have to go to the White House. So, I don't know, I didn't like it, but yeah, we said okay. She's a consultant to the White House Commission on Women and Girls. She's received funding from several organizations and foundations, including the Carnegie Foundation, the Noyce Foundation, and the Hewlett Foundation. And she's currently working with Dr. Linda Darling Hammond on a $1.3 million project entitled Innovation in Middle Schools Utopia, which is funded by the George Lucas Education Foundation. And in her spare time, she also serves as Stanford's Vice President for Online Learning.
No.
That's what your video said.
That's it?
It is.
I should never have sent you that video.
I have a printout in my folder.
Anyway,
All right.
it's enough now, enough.
No, I have two more things to say. All right. I haven't talked to you about her authorship. She's written 9 books. One is in press. Get your advance order on Amazon. It's the one that's in press is entitled Mathematical Mindsets, Unleashing Students' Potential Through Creative Math, Inspiring Messages, and Innovative Teaching. And she's also published lots of articles. 2 recent ones may be of particular interest to folks in this group. In the April issue of Teaching Children Mathematics, she had an article entitled, well, it was an opinion piece, but with lots of data and references, entitled Research Suggests That Timed Tests Can Cause Math Anxiety. And she also published in The Atlantic just last November, The Stereotypes That Distort How Americans Teach and Learn Mathematics. I've shared both of those with my prospective elementary teachers in my math methods classes, and they connected with them. I think they connect with a lot of people. I'm so happy she's here because she's one of those rare people who not only can connect with our professional community, but also she connects with the public. She's focused on engaging the public and raising awareness of the important issues related to math, teaching, and learning. The title of her presentation today probably says it up there. The Mindset Revolution, Teaching Mathematics for a Growth Mindset. We're going to make sure to have some time for questions at the end, but please join me in welcoming Dr. Jo Boaler.
Thank you, Nadine, for that very comprehensive introduction. I should never have sent her my CV, I realise now. But good afternoon, everybody. I'm the support act for Lady Gaga, turns out. So you're in the right place. So, the Mindset Revolution. I'm sure many of you know or have heard some things about mindset. In 2006, Carol Dweck published a book, which you can see here, Mindset, the New Psychology of Success, which quickly became a New York Times bestseller. And in it, she showed the data that shows that everybody has a mindset, a belief, a core belief about learning. You have a mindset, I have one, kids have them. And people with a growth mindset believe that the harder you work, the smarter you get. People with a fixed mindset believe that you're smart or you're not. And there's a lot of fixed mindset thinking around mathematics, as you probably know. But as math educators, we have to deal with a really strong myth that's in this country that it says that people believe that being good at math is a gift. And some people are naturally good at math and some people are not. We have decades of research that disprove this in every possible way. There is no gift. People aren't born without a gift or with a gift. But it's a very strong myth that's out there. And I think it's one of the reasons that we have widespread underachievement in the US is so many kids believe that they don't have the gift. So I wrote a book a few years ago now, which in the US was called What's Math Got to Do With It? And in England, it was called The Elephant in the Classroom. It's really a similar book with British spellings in in one of them, but also things about England. But anyway, I called the book The Elephant in the Classroom because I argued in that book that there's a big elephant standing in most math classrooms. And you know the expression the elephant in the room, which refers to an idea that everybody thinks about but nobody talks about. And I argue in the book that the big elephant that's standing in most math classrooms is the idea that only some kids are going to be good at math. Most of the students believe that. Unfortunately, many teachers believe it, parents believe it. And as I said, it's one of the reasons we have a lot of underachievement in the US. So where do people get this strange idea that there's a math gene and that only some people can do math? I spend way too much time these days watching tweeny TV shows because I have 2 young daughters. And I catch glimpses of them, but what's amazing is math comes up every day in TV shows, every single day, and always in the same way, very negatively, as a subject that's boring and inaccessible, and only nerdy people do it, but also you actually get fixed mindset messages about math given to kids in TV shows. So we'll have a look at one of them now. Anybody here seen Shake It Up? You might recognize it when you see some of it. So let's listen to the message about math you hear here.
Oh, so how'd you do on your algebra test? This is such a funny story. I sat next to a kid that fell asleep while taking the test. Yeah? He did better than me. Ooh, T. So that's how those look. Shushi. This means the next test I need at least a B or I'm off the show. Wait, we'll just work harder. No. I'm just lousy at math.
So you heard that message pretty clearly. Work harder, no, I'm just lousy at math. Some others. Here we have Steve Martin sitting in a cupboard.
They're doing homework right now, and it's that math trigonometry thing that you and I just aren't very good at.
That thing you and I just aren't very good at. And then there's a few stereotypes in this one that you'll probably spot.
Math? How am I supposed to know that? I'm a beautiful, popular, rich kid with a promising future in a lightweight sorority at a state college. I don't need to know that stuff.
It's pretty bad. So, what does the research tell us? Over recent years, scientists have had to completely rethink what we know about learning, and a lot of it's come from the new evidence that's come out on brain plasticity. So the brain isn't actually made of plastic, but the scientists now know that it's so flexible that the brain can change and grow in a really short space of time. So we know that when learning happens, a synapse fires. It's like an electric current in your brain that goes from one part of your brain to the next. And synapses are a little bit like footprints in the sand. If you learn something deeply, it will stay. But if you just learn it in a shallow way, it can just wash away and it doesn't stay in the brain. So we know that learning creates and strengthens synapses, and the plasticity of the brain means that these synapses are growing well into, all through adulthood. Good news for us. That if these pathways aren't followed, they may be discarded. So one of the studies that really changed the way scientists think about learning, and now has been studied a great deal, is a study done of London, what are called black cab drivers. Can you put your hand up if you've ever been in one of these, a London black cab? Wow, lots of you. So there are lots of there are different taxis in England, but the sort of queen bee of taxis is the black cab. And it turns out that to be a black cab driver, you have to be highly qualified, and that the drivers take a course that takes between 2 and 4 years. And at the end of the course, they have to take a test, which has a very beautiful title of the knowledge. And to pass the knowledge, you have to know 25,000 streets and 20,000 landmarks in the London area. And London's not based on a grid structure, as you can see. There's a lot of small little interwoven roads. So what amazed doctors was they found that at the end of this period of complex spatial work, the hippocampus part of the brain of taxi drivers grows significantly. And the hippocampus is the area that's specialized in acquiring and using complex spatial information. At the end of being a taxi driver, when taxi drivers retire, the hippocampus shrinks back down again. So this was, completely new for doctors. And around the time these studies were coming out, I don't know if you saw this in the news, but there was a sort of revolutionary medical procedure where a girl had half of her brain removed. It had never happened before because she kept having fits. So they removed a hemisphere. And what amazed the doctors was that at first she couldn't move because the brain controls your physical functions. But within a really short space of time, she grew back the other sort of side of the brain and was able to recover the features. And then one of the ones that I think is most important for us as educators, a 3-week training program where people worked on something for 10 minutes a day for 3 weeks. So they did something 15 times, changed the structure of their brains. So one of the things we know from this brain research is that every child can excel in mathematics in all levels, in school. There are these ideas around that, some kids aren't ready for algebra or can't learn algebra, which are, we have no basis for at all now. If your brain can change structurally in 3 weeks, imagine what it can do in a year of math class. But these fixed ideas about kids still prevail in schools. We talk about smart and slow kids, fast and slow, smart and something else. It's really important to change that. And it turns out that it's also really important the way students themselves feel and understand about their own abilities. So in Carol's studies, I explained that there are these two types of mindset. Turns out that kids with a growth mindset are the ones who do really well and continue to do better and better. And that's because those who have a growth mindset also engage in a set of behaviors. They're more persistent, they're willing to learn from mistakes, they're very determined to keep going. Kids with a fixed mindset are the ones, if you're a math teacher, you'll recognize this, where you give some harder, more open-ended work, and the students immediately go, I can't do this, I'm stuck, I need help. That is a fixed mindset in action. So mindset affects students from across the achievement spectrum. The worst hit group by fixed mindset thinking is high-achieving girls, and that was part of what I was talking about at the White House. And we know that parents are really important in parents and teachers, and that kids develop a fixed mindset from the praise that they're given. So we now know it's really damaging to do what a lot of American parents do, which is praise their kids for being smart. American parents do that all the time. When their kids do well, they say, you're so smart. And what we now know is that when kids hear that message, I'm so smart, they feel good for a while, but when they fail later, and they do, they then think, I'm not so smart. And those fixed messages are what creates a fixed mindset. This graph just shows you, they gave a survey to kids in 7th grade and then just followed them in terms of their achievement. And the survey shows you the kids with a fixed mindset and the ones with a growth mindset. And you can see those are just, the ones with a growth mindset go onwards and upwards and upwards. So another graph, this shows you, they followed kids as they entered middle school. Turns out when kids start middle school, their achievement goes down. But when kids had a mindset intervention in the spring of 7th grade, you can see it stopped that decline and they start going upwards. We also know that mindset's really important for issues of equity. Students of colour have the most increase when they receive mindset interventions, and so do girls. And when they look, even in tests where they find small gender gaps at some levels, those disappear when they take out fixed mindset kids. So it's super important. I've been working a bit lately with the team who does the PISA tests, which you may have seen. They're international math tests that are reported always in the newspapers. The US came 28th out of 31 countries in the last round in math. And they also, though, collect a lot of data on things like mindset and students' approaches to math. So one of the things we're looking at is students' strategies, their math strategies, and they collect the math strategies of kids. So it turns out that the kids who use what they call a memorization strategy are the lowest achieving kids in the world. Kids who approach math thinking they're going to remember methods. And the highest achievers are kids who think about the big ideas and mathematical connections. So this graph shows you the huge difference that mindset makes. That's like over a year of math. So these are the kids with a fixed mindset, and these are the kids with a growth mindset, and the red bar is the kids who have a growth mindset and use positive math strategies. Those together are a really great combination. So I started working with teachers and conducting workshops. In fact, I'm doing one in San Diego in the summer on how to teach math for a growth mindset. And I started doing that because I was hearing from principals that math teachers were coming to them and saying, I love mindset, I've read Carol Dweck's book, I totally get it, but what does it mean for my math teaching? So of course, as you may know, mindset has a lot to do with teaching, and it's infused at all aspects of teaching. And I'm going to show you a little bit of what I work on in the mindset workshop with teachers, just a glimpse at each of these things. But all of them are super important for the mindset messages we give to kids. So I'm not going to dwell on the first one, which is grouping, but I can tell you I asked an audience of 800 people, teacher leaders, math teacher leaders, what they thought was the aspect of school that gave the biggest fixed mindset messages to kids, and the overwhelming choice was ability grouping. Ability grouping is something that we know is ineffective from research. It's something where there's a really big gap between what we know and what happens in most schools that use ability grouping. And I'll just show you one study to illustrate that. It was a really big study done of 6 cohorts from the District of New York, and it happened to be that the kids were in tracks in middle school for 3 years, and then the following 3 years they untracked or detracked, whatever the term is, and they were able to follow kids, continue following them. And what they found was the kids who went through the untracked cohorts achieved at higher levels. They took more advanced math classes in high school, and they passed the state test a year earlier. And this is typical of studies of ability grouping. They show advantages for kids at both ends of the spectrum. But what I do want to spend a bit more time on today is the tasks that are done in math classrooms. So I think it's very hard to have a growth mindset about math if math class is a series of short, closed questions that are either right or wrong. When students are constantly working on questions like that they get right or wrong, what they come to believe is that math really is a performance subject. So it turns out that if you ask most kids what they're doing in math class, they think they're there to get questions right. So that's very different from learning, and that's about performing. And I think a lot of math classrooms now actually offer math as a performance subject, not as a learning subject. So kids go in thinking that they're going in to get questions right. This really came home to me recently when a colleague of mine, Rachel Lambert, said her 6-year-old son had come home that day and said he didn't like math. And she said, why? What's happened? And he said to her, math is too much answer time and not enough learning time. So that, he says it very well. It may seem amazing that a 6-year-old gets that insight, but it shows you how strongly students see and get this. And what I am teaching teachers is that if you want to give people the idea that math is a learning subject and a growth subject, then tasks have to have inside them the space to learn. If a task is really, or a question is really just getting an answer where students just do a calculation, they don't have that space inside them. So at Stanford, we've sort of developed a framework for looking at different tasks and seeing do they give opportunities for kids to learn something inside them. And to do that, they need a certain amount of openness. So math tasks can be open, so we value different ways of seeing something, different ways maybe of representing the ideas. They may have different entry points that kids can join in different places. They should value different pathways and strategies. So I'm going to show you an example now, get you thinking a bit about some math. So this example comes from an algebra class I taught with some of my doctoral students at Stanford. I teach the people training to be teachers at Stanford, and it's a year-round program, and they always start in the summer, and they do a placement in summer school, and I was never too thrilled with the teaching they were watching in that first summer placement. So one year we decided to go in and teach the classes ourselves, so that was fun. We had 5 weeks. The kids were pretty disaffected, and they didn't want to be there. They were made to come to summer school. 90% of them had been made to come by their school or parent. But we wanted to teach algebra as a problem-solving tool rather than an endpoint, but something that's really helpful to solve problems. So the students were mainly underachieving 7th and 8th grade students. We're going to see some in a minute. And we pulled tasks from different places. Ruth Parker has great tasks, so does Mark Driscoll. He has a series of books with wonderful tasks in, and the other two are from England, so they're not so easy to get hold of. But I want to give you one of the math questions now, and we haven't really got time for you to do the math question for a long time. If we had longer, I'd get you to work on it for some time, and that would be fun. But I'm going to ask you a particular question. I'm going to show you like a pattern growth task where you have a number of things, and then you have some more. The question that usually goes with that is sort of how many are in the 100th case or whatever. I want to ask you a different question, which is, I want to know how you see the shapes growing. This is a visual question, how visually you see them. I don't want numbers, I don't want algebraic expressions. And this is the first three cases, and these were multi-link cubes that we gave the kids. So my question for you, and think about this on your own for a minute, is how do you see it growing? So you probably see that there are more cubes added on each time. And the question really is, where are they adding on? So put your thumb here for me if you can see where you see a way that they're adding on. Or see if you need more time. Okay. All right. So as I said, if we had time, we'd work on this together in groups a bit, but we don't. So I'm going to show you some different ways people see this. And my students at Stanford have started giving these names, which you'll see. So this is one way to see how these grow, which they call the raindrop method, where just like drops of rain, the cubes come down each time on top. So who here saw it in that way? Who here saw it in a raindrop way? Quite a lot of you. All right, so this other way that a lot of people see it in, they've started calling the bowling alley method. So in the bowling alley method, it's as though a row of pins are coming, and so that's another way of seeing it, is that actually you can see a row of squares or cubes adding on. How many saw it in that way, the bowling alley way? Not quite as popular as the raindrops. Okay, and then another way, actually one of the teachers I work with called it this last week, is what they call a volcano method, where they see it getting higher in the next case, and as she said, it sort of encourages the other blocks out. So you can see this called, this is the volcano method. Did anybody see the volcano method? Oh, lots of you actually. Volcano method's growing in popularity. And then this one, the square method. So the best way to think about this is if you look at the first case and you imagine taking that red square and moving it on top of the blue square, it would become a square. So like this.
They like that one.
I know, I like them. This is mathematical appreciation sounds. Who saw the square method? No one? Oh, one? There are others. Did anybody see it in another way? A few of you. Well, turns out kids see these mathematical things in different ways too. And I did something with you which we did with the kids in the classroom, which is we gave the question and we gave people time to think entirely on their own. So a lot of times when we have kids work in groups, we throw them an activity and they work together in groups on it. For this one, we wanted them to think individually first, because if they immediately start working together, you'll find that everybody sees it the same way and goes in that direction. So at this point, after I'd asked you to think about it, I would have asked you to talk as a group and discuss your different methods, which is what we did with these kids. So I'll introduce you to these three boys that we're going to watch on video now. So these three boys were the naughtiest boys in my class. They came in, they didn't know each other, but they came into class and they were the ones who were like shouting stuff out at the board and not interested in math. And then within a short space of time, we started to notice they became super focused on math, on these math tasks we were giving them. I should say that the first day of class in the summer school, the kids shuffled in the room, they had their hoods up, They had their heads there. They really did not want to be there. They made it really clear. And within a few weeks, they were jostling at the door to get in the room. And these 3 boys were an example of that. So when we watch this video, it's interesting to know that Luke here on your left had got an A in his previous math class. And Jorge had got an F. And Carlos over here got a D. So these were pretty mixed up in achievement. And this task actually leads to a quadratic function. And the students developed the quadratic function. And this is a task that I like to think of as what I would call a low-floor, high-ceiling task that classrooms should be full of. So it has a low floor because anybody can see the shapes and think about them, but it goes high and kids can take it to high levels. So it turns out in this group we're going to watch, they saw it in 2 different ways. So Luke and Jorge saw it as a bowling alley method, and Carlos saw it as the raindrop method. And the first thing they did when they were in their groups was realize that they'd seen it differently. So Carlos starts off saying, so watch that case 0, right, adds up by 1, the sides go up by 1, right? And it adds up. And Luke says, you mean it puts 1 on the bottom? So there, and he says, what? So this is the start of them realizing they've seen it in different ways. They then very carefully explain their different ways of seeing it to each other. And then they start using different ways of seeing it. This analysis of the boys comes from one of my doctoral students, Sarah Kate Selling. She did a really nice job of this, but it was very interesting zooming in on watching them. And one of the reasons we did that was because these boys who had come into the first day not interested in math spent 70 minutes on this task, 70. And during that 70 minutes, they never went off task, they didn't stop working. At one point, some girls came over and started poking them with a pen, and they picked up their work and they went and moved to another table, and they just carried on and on and on. So we're going to watch a little bit of them at work, and I want you to think about it. So this says mathematical practices. You know, the kids were engaging in a lot of what we now know as mathematical practices in the Common Core. But it's also a case of a very heterogeneous group of kids working together. You'll hear them mention Gauss. So Gauss is a mathematician. You probably know about Gauss, who has a famous story about him that when he was a young child, his maths teacher had tried to shut him up and keep him quiet by asking him to add all the numbers from 1 to 100. And he added them really quickly, which, you know, confused the teacher. And it turned out he used a method where he sort of said, well, 1 and 99 is 100, and 2 and 98 is 100, and 3 and 97 is 100. And he paired them. And we showed them this earlier, like the week before, and you're going to hear them sort of say, oh, they refer back to Gauss, which is good, because they were thinking about the structure. But I have a question for you as you watch this, and my question is, what engages these students so strongly and for so long in this? We're just going to watch 5 minutes of the kids at work. What's going on for this group of boys who didn't normally engage in these ways, that was so engaged on an abstract math task, nothing to do with their lives? They were very proud at this point. They hadn't got it, but they were feeling good. And they did get it eventually. But so my question for you, and I want you to talk to people around you for a minute, is what do you think engaged these kids so much in this abstract math task? Sorry to cut off your conversation. I hate doing that, but we have a schedule. So, would anybody like to share? What do they think? We'll see if we can hear it. What do they think engaged those kids so strongly in those moments? Yeah.
We were saying that it was more like a puzzle instead of like a traditional equation or something.
Yeah, they saw it as a puzzle or something that they were trying to solve. I think that was really a big part of it. Anybody? Anything else? Yeah.
And there was dialogue. It wasn't just a answer. There was ideas that were being built upon and back and forth. So the idea of dialogue, I think, is very engaging for kids that age.
Yeah. Did you? Somebody else have a hand? Yeah.
My partner said it's because they were able to solve it in a way that made sense to them.
These are all really good answers. You guys are great. Anything else? Anyone else? Yeah, at the back.
They seem to just respect each other's space.
Yeah. You know, teachers say it's really hard having kids working in groups because they're not respectful of each other. And these kids have been in groups for 3 weeks. So you can teach kids. And these kids also had only ever sat and worked on worksheets in silence in math before. So, you know, you can teach kids things. So, yeah.
I think they're engaged because instead of following a prescription given to them by authority, they can come up with something of their own.
Right.
And because they're peers, they can actually argue their point. So
Yeah.
it's hard to argue with the teacher.
Right.
And now they kind of can make and argue their own point.
Yeah, that's right. I think those are all absolutely right. And the only other thing I would add to that is we deliberately use very visual tasks, and they also have physical representations. And what we found is that, and I think this is true generally, it gives kids a lot more access to understanding. These kids, so this was interesting. I gave this task to a group of high school math teachers in this area, actually, and I didn't ask them in these days, I didn't ask how did you see the shape. I asked, and actually this was the question the kids got, how many are in case 100? And something interesting happened. The teachers drew a table. They said in the first case there's 4, in the second there's 9, in the third there's 16. They stared at the table for a long time, and then they said it's n plus 1 squared. And I said, okay, why is it squared? Why do you think it's n plus 1 squared? Where's the squaring? And they sort of, had no idea. And of course, this is why it's squared, why the function is squared. Now, so these kids understood these things. They had a very physical realization. The algebra meant something to them. They could tell you what n was. They could tell you where it was. They could tell you why it's squared. This is how algebra should be introduced to kids. These kids thought algebra was the coolest thing ever. Not in the way that it's usually introduced in classrooms. But anyway, so the general point is when we open up math tasks, and there are different ways of seeing, people have talked about this, different pathways, different representations, then the opportunities for learning increase, and so are the opportunities for developing a growth mindset. And it doesn't have to happen in bigger tasks like the one we just saw. I have a book with a great teacher called Kathy Humphries, and it's got videos of her teaching 7th grade. She's wonderful, and her lesson plans. And in one of them, they're working on 1 divided by 2/3. Well, that could be a totally closed math question with one answer, but she does something to it, and she says to them that they have to work out the answer and then come and justify their answer with visual representations. So about half the class decided the answer was 6 because you can do something magical with those numbers and get the answer of 6. But they really had a hard time showing where 6 lots of 2/3 were, and eventually the other kids who had shown it, and they showed it in different ways. So that you can open up any math task in these different ways for different ways of seeing and different ways of. And she opened it up by really saying that it had to make sense to them. So another thing that's coming out of neuroscience, and I wanted to talk briefly about just while we talk about the brain and other things that's really interesting, is the finding that neuroscientists are now saying is that math should never be associated with speed. We know that time tests cause math anxiety for kids. they used it everywhere. I mean, it's unbelievable. I'm on a little campaign trail to try and get rid of time tests. And this article was part of that. It was published in the NCTM journal in April, which has the evidence and why it is. But what they now know, and I haven't brought my brain picture here, but what we now know is that math facts are held in the working memory part of your brain. And when people are stressed, their working memory is blocked and they can't access math facts. So you may have experienced this, I know I've experienced this. If you've had to do some math under pressure, maybe with people watching or in a public situation, and you just suddenly feel like your mind's gone blank, like you just can't think of the math that you know. That's the impact of stress hitting the working memory in the brain. So what we know is when kids take time tests, about 1/3 of them get very stressed. They can't access the math. And I could also, on another day, I could have spent time talking to you about how mathematicians actually are not fast at math. And I have a great quote from a Fields Medal winning mathematician talking about how he always felt stupid in school because he was the slowest math thinker. So we need to debunk this idea too, that speed is what's important in math. Actually, high-level math thinkers think about connections in depth. They don't speed through anything. And then another thing that's so interesting. So the very first time I taught a growth mindset workshop, Carol Dweck came in on one of the days, and she said something that made all the teachers in the room go, and what she said was this. She said, every time a student makes a mistake in math, they grow a synapse fires in their brain. And actually, we have more evidence now. In a research study that came out last year, they found that the students worked on all these questions. Their brains were firing when they made mistakes, but when they got work right, there was no brain activity. So this is important because it actually tells us that, mistakes are a really good thing, and mistakes are the time when kids' brains are growing. And teachers say to me, oh, but they must have worked through the mistake and got to the right answer. And no, they didn't do that. They didn't even know they'd made a mistake. They go through test questions when kids make a mistake, when students make a mistake, synapses fire. And the reason for that is their brain is in a place of struggle. And it's struggle that makes brains grow. So we want students making mistakes in classrooms. So good teachers have always been good about mistakes and said to kids, oh, this is, it's good to make mistakes, we can learn from them. But it's more than that. We want kids actually making mistakes. So, but we know that students everywhere hate making mistakes. They think because they've been brought up in this performance culture that it means they're not a math person. And a lot of students and most teachers, unfortunately, view a mistake negatively. So it's very important that we start repositioning mistakes. I had an interesting chat with Sal Khan last week and showed him a bit of a student MOOC, which I'm going to show you later, which gives this evidence on mistakes. And he immediately said, oh, we should change the Khan videos so people don't get a cross when they make a mistake. They can get a little brain growth symbol. So he ran off that afternoon to make that change. And so they're trying that out in some of their videos now. So that was good. But anyway, another thing I want to leave you with before we watch more video is there's a lot of evidence coming out that's really showing that one of the most important things for kids, of course it's important how they're taught math, but they're also really hugely affected by relatively small messages that they receive from teachers or parents. Like a lot of us know this. I teach a class every year at Stanford of math traumatized freshmen, and half of them will tell me that it all went wrong for them when a teacher said, and then there's for a lot of girls, teachers are told early on, don't worry, math isn't your thing, by teachers who are trying to be helpful and sympathetic. But one of the studies that showed the power of teachers' messages in an amazing way, I thought, was a study that was done. This was one of those studies where I found it hard to believe, it's so stunning. But a study was done where they had large numbers of kids who did high school English essays. They all received critical diagnostic comments from the teacher, but half of the kids received an extra sentence. And nothing else was different. No, the teacher didn't know who got the sentence. It was put on by researchers. But the kids who got that extra sentence did significantly better in their achievement a year later. And the extra sentence they got was this. So at the end of the diagnostic feedback, it said, "I'm giving you this feedback because I believe in you." And those kids did significantly better a year later, and again, especially high gains for students of colour. So I share this with teachers, but I say to them, I don't share this so you go around saying this to all the kids, but just so you know, although it's a very powerful sentence, but just so you know the power of your words, they can make that much difference to kids. They can turn kids around, as happened for these kids in this study. So if you want to read more things or read up about some more of this, Nadine mentioned an article I published in The Atlantic at the end of last year. That's easy to find online still if you just Google my name and The Atlantic. And it talks about some of these ideas about why we shouldn't be emphasizing speed and what it means. I also wanted to share with you, I taught an online class. Did anybody in here take it? It was amazing, actually. I never expected what came out of it. So 40,000 people took it, teachers and parents. And at the end, 92% of people said it was very or extremely satisfying. 8 times more people finished it than any other MOOC. And 95% of people at the end said they would change their teaching as a result. And I know that they did because I've had well over 1,000 emails from teachers telling me about the changes and what happened to their students. Stanford now charging for it, which is out of my hands, but it did cost them hundreds of thousands to make, actually, so now they're getting some back, but people will tell you it's worth it, right?
It's so worth it.
So that's just about to reopen on June 17th. So if you're a parent or a teacher and you want to get more depth on some of the ideas I've been talking about. The other thing, I'm very excited, I've just finished a new MOOC which is for students, and this is to get these ideas straight to kids, that they can do math, that they have the brains. So there are 6 lessons, they're very short, they're 50 minutes each, designed to improve students' relationship with math, designed to give them a growth mindset. We're also showing math to be this engaging subject, we're teaching them math strategies, and I taught it with my undergrad class, so that makes it a bit more interesting, and we involved, it turns out my class had people who are really good at soccer and juggling and all sorts, so that's about to open, same day as the teacher course. And I think would be fine for anybody who's over about 10, but it's designed to go all the way up to adults, really for anyone who's either having a bad time with math or has a bad relationship with math. This is designed to change that. So I'm going to show you a little clip. This clip actually, we prepared it for the White House Day on Gender, so it's kind of gender oriented, but it will give you a sense of what the class is like. When you make a mistake in math, your brain grows. Synapses fire in your brain. In fact, your brain grows when you make a mistake, but when you get work right, no brain growth happens.
Let's look at the brain evidence. Scientists now know that experiences grow your brain, and the brain is so plastic that it can rewire itself and grow in a really short space of time. In lots of stores, you will see aisles that are pink, meant for girls, and aisles that are blue, meant for boys. The blue ones, for boys, have building and construction toys that are really good for math.
So if you know students who could be helped by that, so at the end of the teacher course, many of the teachers wrote to me saying, we want more of the ideas. So Kathy Williams, who's sitting over there, who's the director of math in Vista Unified in San Diego, and I made this website which has the ideas on the website. It's called ucubed, ucubed.org will take you there. It's just about to be relaunched with lots of new stuff on it. So at the moment there's some nice things on it, but not loads. But there will be, and over the summer we're going to be adding more and more stuff. So if you go to the site, it will ask you to give it your email. We don't do anything with the emails, we don't sell them or anything. And it asks you to do a math problem. The web designers did this. So they know you're not an alien. And somebody once tweeted me and said they were glad it wasn't timed, which it's not timed, but you will be asked to do that. So go to YouCubed, and then the final thing I wanted to share with you is I'm now working with a filmmaker, which is great. Filmmakers can get stuff out to the public and be, really use media in a very powerful way. So she was the director of Race to Nowhere. Did anybody here see Race to Nowhere? A few of you. And now she's doing a new film after Race to Nowhere, which is much more positive. Race to Nowhere was kind of gloomy, but in doing this, she's found that so many people are concerned about math, and math is such a disaster area that she's doing a separate little film on math. So again, this was a clip that we put together for the White House, so it has a gender orientation. But what you'll see in this is the work. I've been working for the past year with Kathy in Vista School District, which you may know, it's not too far from here. And we have got the math. We've been doing professional development with the middle school math teachers, and they have changed to teaching more inquiry-based math. And you'll see some of that in this clip. So, yeah, this is about 2 minutes long.
In the United States, people think people have a math gene. Either you're born with it or you're not. If you don't have it, then you just don't have it.
Teachers believe that, parents believe it, students believe it. And it's one of the reasons that we have such widespread math failure and math trauma in the States.
I hated math. I absolutely hated it. I felt like I was I wasn't nothing. When I went into other classes, I was like, well, I'm already failing in that class. Why don't I just fail in these classes? I wouldn't really try. I wouldn't push myself.
It's amazing how many teachers have said to girls, don't worry, you don't need to be good at math. Math isn't your thing. Don't worry about that. When kids get the idea that they're not a math person and they start this sort of downward trajectory, many careers are cut off from them. And this happens to a lot of women, unfortunately. Their career options shrink massively. So we have a situation now where most engineers and most people who work in computer science are men.
I hated math, to be honest with you. When I was younger, I felt that I couldn't do the problems quickly, and I thought you had to do them really fast. I think a lot of students come in with some of the same ideas that I had as a middle school student. They think that if they make mistakes, that means that they're not smart. Working with Joe has been really helpful in breaking down those stereotypes.
So what do you mean when you said it's not working?
Wait, did you just...
Can I borrow this really quick?
Yeah, and shoot her question.
I have a connection with math now, definitely. It's I'm open and I feel alive, and I'm definitely more energetic in science. We use math a lot, and I feel when they bring up math subjects, I'm oh, I learned that already. I could be open to learning new things.
Well, that's we're trying to get both of us.
Yeah, but we're trying to figure out.
So when she finishes the bit longer version of this, they're going to send it to CNN. It's just a short little math film, and you can find that and both online courses on YouCubed if you want to go there and you want to find links to that film. So that's all I was going to share with you today. I think we have some time for questions, right?
We do have some time for questions.